Christmas morning, 2017. The smell of pine and cinnamon usually filled our suburban Michigan home with warmth, but that year, it just felt suffocating. My sister, Clara, sat across from me, her eyes wide with anticipation. She was always the golden child, the one who effortlessly excelled at everything, while I, Mark, just existed in her shadow. This particular morning, however, solidified that dynamic in a way I could never have predicted. Our parents, bless their hearts, always made Christmas a grand affair. The tree glittered with ornaments from our childhoods, a testament to decades of shared memories. But then, my dad, with a strange solemnity in his voice, cleared his throat. He held a small velvet box. My heart did a little flutter. Was it finally my turn for something truly special? Something that wasn't a hand-me-down or a practical gift disguised as a present? He handed the box to Clara. Her smile, already bright, widened impossibly. I felt a familiar pang of resentment, a dull ache that had become a constant companion. She unwrapped it, and inside, nestled on a satin cushion, was a single gleaming house key. Not a car key, not a decorative trinket, a real, honest-to-goodness house key. My mother, usually so effusive, just looked at Clara with a knowing, almost conspiratorial gaze. Then, my dad spoke, his words hanging in the air like icicles, sharp and cold. He said, "Clara, this is for you, a new beginning. You'll understand soon." I stared, dumbfounded. A house key? For Clara? What did he mean, a new beginning? And the chilling part, the phrase that burrowed deep into my mind and refused to leave was, "You'll understand soon." Understand what? The unspoken implication hung heavy. Clara would understand, but I wouldn't. I was outside this secret, this momentous occasion. The resentment I felt morphed into something darker, a simmering anger I barely recognized. I tried to act casual, to play it off. A key? To what? A new shed? I forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher, pity mixed with something else, something almost like triumph? Clara, meanwhile, just clutched the key, her face radiating pure joy, completely oblivious to the earthquake that had just rumbled through my world. That moment, the sight of that key in her hand, ignited a spark within me. It wasn't just about the key, not really. It was about the years of feeling second best, of being overlooked, of being the one who wouldn't understand. It was about every subtle slight, every whispered comparison, every time I was told to be more like Clara. This wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration, a public, undeniable statement of who truly mattered in our family. The next few months were a blur of unanswered questions and growing unease. Clara started spending weekends away, vague about her whereabouts. My parents became even more secretive, their hushed conversations ceasing abruptly whenever I entered the room. The air in our home, once filled with laughter, now felt thick with unspoken truths. I felt like an outsider in my own life, a ghost haunting the edges of a story I was supposedly a part of. The key became a symbol, a constant reminder of the secret they shared, a secret that excluded me. I started to feel an unshakable sense of betrayal, not just from my parents but from Clara too. How could she keep something so significant from me, her own brother? The resentment I'd always carried festered, growing into a burning obsession. I needed to know. I needed to understand. What was this secret? What did that key truly unlock? And why was I, the one who had always been there, the one who had always tried, left in the dark? This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. This was about justice. This was about reclaiming my place, about tearing down the carefully constructed facade of our perfect family. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that the truth, whatever it was, held the key to understanding everything, and I was determined to find it. What I uncovered, however, was far more shocking, far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The house key was just the beginning. What it truly unlocked was a legacy of lies, a web of deceit, and a truth that would shatter our family forever. And the confrontation that followed? That was just the start of everything unraveling. The scent of pine needles and cinnamon usually filled our house on Christmas morning, a comforting aroma that promised joy and togetherness. This particular Christmas, however, a different smell permeated the air, a metallic tang of unease, sharp and unsettling. I remember the chill in the air, not just from the winter outside, but from the silence that had settled over the living room, thick and heavy. My parents sat on the sofa, unusually rigid, their smiles strained. Across from them, my younger sister Sarah bounced with an almost manic energy, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around her. I sat in my usual armchair, a mug of lukewarm cocoa clutched in my hands, trying to decipher the unreadable expressions on my parents' faces. They had always been an open book to me, their emotions transparent, but today they were veiled. Sarah, still in her reindeer pajamas, tore into a brightly wrapped box. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, glinted a single polished brass key. She pulled it out, her brow furrowed in confusion. "A key? What's this for?" she asked, her voice a little higher than usual. My father cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. "That, sweetheart," he began, his gaze flicking to my mother, then back to Sarah, "is for your new house." My cocoa mug slipped slightly in my grasp, the warm liquid threatening to spill. A house? Sarah was barely 20, still in college, living at home. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. My mother then spoke, her voice soft but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "You'll understand soon, Sarah." My own heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "Understand what?" I looked from Sarah, who was now examining the key with a dawning awe, to my parents, whose faces remained impassive. A cold dread began to coil in my stomach. This wasn't a joke, not a miscommunication. This was deliberate. My parents, who had always preached equality and fairness, had just gifted my younger sister a house, and to me, nothing. No key, no cryptic promises, just a profound, unsettling silence. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of forced cheer and internal turmoil. Sarah, caught up in the excitement of her unexpected gift, chattered endlessly about decor and paint colors. My parents indulged her, their attention solely focused on her, their responses warm and encouraging. I sat there, a silent observer, feeling the invisible wall rise between us, thicker and more impenetrable with every passing minute. The metallic tang in the air intensified, now laced with the bitter scent of injustice. I had always been the dependable one, the older sister who always did everything right. I graduated college with honors, secured a stable job, and had even started saving for my own down payment. Sarah, bless her free spirit, had always been a little more spontaneous. She changed majors 3 times, accumulated student loan debt that dwarfed mine, and still relied on our parents for most of her expenses. Yet, she was the one holding the key. The unfairness of it gnawed at me, a sharp, persistent ache. Later that day, when Sarah was out showing off her new key to our aunt, I confronted my parents. I found them in the kitchen, washing dishes, a picture of domestic tranquility that felt like a cruel mockery. "What was that about?" I asked, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. "The key? The house?" My father sighed, turning off the faucet. My mother avoided my gaze, meticulously drying a plate. "It's complicated, same character from section 1, my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are things you don't know. Things I don't know?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Like why my sister gets a house and I get nothing. Why she understands soon and I'm left in the dark." The words tumbled out, fueled by a mixture of hurt and bewildered anger. My father placed a hand on my mother's shoulder, a gesture of quiet support. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. I couldn't comprehend. "This isn't about favoritism, same character from section 1, he said, his voice low and deliberate. "This is about protection, about making sure Sarah is safe." "Safe from what?" The question screamed in my mind, but before I could voice it, my mother interjected, her voice firmer now. "We can't explain everything right now, you just have to trust us." Trust them? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My entire life I had trusted them implicitly. Now they were asking for blind faith while simultaneously shattering my perception of our family. The sense of betrayal was a physical blow, leaving me breathless. This wasn't just about a house, it was about a hidden narrative, a secret world I was suddenly excluded from. The resentment began to fester, a poisonous seed planted deep within me. I left the kitchen, the metallic tang of unease now a bitter metallic taste on my tongue. The Christmas lights twinkled outside, but inside a profound darkness had begun to settle. I knew with a chilling certainty that my life and my relationship with my family would never be the same. The quiet that followed my mother's cryptic words stretched, thin and brittle, like ice over a deep dark lake. Sarah, still clutching the key, looked from my parents to me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. For a fleeting second I saw a question in her eyes, a plea for explanation, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a dawning excitement. She turned the key over in her palm, its brass glinting in the soft Christmas light, a symbol of a future I was suddenly excluded from. The resentment began to fester, a poisonous seed planted deep within me. I left the kitchen, the metallic tang of unease now a bitter, metallic taste on my tongue. The Christmas lights twinkled outside, but inside, a profound darkness had begun to settle. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my life and my relationship with my family would never be the same. That evening, the forced cheer of Christmas dinner felt like a cruel charade. Every laugh, every clinking glass, every shared anecdote between my parents and Sarah felt like a deliberate exclusion, a painful reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. I watched as Sarah animatedly described her plans for decorating her new place, her words punctuated by my parents' indulgent smiles and nods. They spoke in veiled terms, hinting at a fresh start for Sarah, a new chapter in her life. My questions, when I dared to voice them, were met with evasions, platitudes about Sarah needing her own space, or vague promises that I would understand when the time was right. The time was right now, I wanted to scream. The time was right when you handed my sister a house key and left me in the dark. The silence that followed my attempts to pry answers felt heavier than any shouted argument. It was a silence filled with unspoken truths, with secrets carefully guarded. I could feel the wall between us growing, brick by brick, constructed not just by their secrecy, but by my own burgeoning anger. I excused myself early from the table, the taste of betrayal far more potent than any holiday feast. The house, usually a sanctuary of warmth and familiarity, now felt cold and alien. Every object, every photograph seemed to mock me with memories of a closeness that had been shattered. I lay in bed, the glow of the Christmas tree filtering through my window, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like mocking figures on the walls. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced, replaying the scene in the living room, dissecting every word, every glance. Why Sarah? Why this sudden, inexplicable gift? And why the secrecy? The questions gnawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. The next few weeks were a blur of cold shoulders and clipped conversations. Sarah, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant of the rift, was consumed by her new venture. She spent hours on the phone, excitedly discussing paint colors and furniture layouts, her voice echoing through the house. My parents, meanwhile, became even more distant, their faces etched with a strange mixture of relief and guilt whenever I was around. They avoided my gaze, their usual warmth replaced by a brittle politeness. It was as if I had become a stranger in my own home, an inconvenient truth they wished would simply disappear. The emotional distance was more painful than any argument. It was a slow, agonizing suffocation, a deliberate erasure of my presence. One afternoon, I overheard a snippet of conversation between my mother and Sarah in the KITC. Hen. My mother's voice was hushed, almost a whisper, but I caught words like settlement and don't tell her yet. My blood ran cold. Settlement? What settlement? The pieces of the puzzle, disjointed and confusing until now, began to shift, forming a horrifying picture. I pressed my ear closer to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah's voice, equally hushed, responded, "But what if she finds out? She'll be furious." My mother's reply was firm, laced with an unsettling resolve. "She won't. Not until it's too late." "This is for your future, Sarah, and it's what's best." The words hit me like a physical blow. Too late. What was too late? A cold dread seeped into my bones, a terrifying premonition that something far more sinister than a simple house gift was at play. I retreated silently, my mind reeling. The betrayal I had felt on Christmas morning now intensified, mutating into a gnawing suspicion. They were conspiring against me, my own family, the people who were supposed to protect and love me unconditionally. The thought was a bitter pill, difficult to swallow. I felt a surge of rage, hot and righteous, course through me. The resentment that had been a seed was now a thorny bush, its roots digging deep into my soul. I had to find out what settlement they were talking about, what secret they were so desperately trying to keep from me. The need for answers became an obsession, eclipsing everything else. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would stop at nothing to uncover the truth, no matter how painful or destructive it might be. My life had been irrevocably altered, and I was no longer content to stand by and watch. I would fight for my place, for my truth, and for the justice I felt was being denied. The metallic tang of unease, which had filled our living room on Christmas morning, didn't dissipate with the holiday decorations. It lingered, a constant bitter aftertaste in my life. Every interaction with my parents became a tightrope walk over a chasm of unspoken truths. They acted as if nothing had changed, their forced cheer a thin veil over the monumental secret they were so desperately trying to keep. Sarah, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of newfound independence, her eyes sparkling with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She'd started disappearing, for hours, sometimes days, always returning with a smug, knowing look I couldn't quite decipher. The key, that brass symbol of her sudden fortune, became a tangible manifestation of the growing chasm between us. I tried to talk to them, to my parents, to understand the inexplicable favoritism. I cornered my mother in the kitchen one afternoon, the scent of her usual pot roast doing little to soothe my frayed nerves. "Mom," I began, my voice carefully modulated about Sarah's gift. She stiffened, her back ramrod straight as she stirred a pot. "What about it, dear?" Her tone was too casual, too dismissive. "A house, Mom? She's 20. Where did it even come from?" I pressed, my patience wearing thin. She turned, her eyes meeting mine, and for a fleeting second, I saw something akin to panic, quickly replaced by a steely resolve. "Some things are best left unquestioned, Sarah. It's for the best." Her words were a brick wall, unyielding and impenetrable. My father was no different. He'd simply pat my shoulder, offer a vague platitude about future plans, and change the subject to the weather or the local football team. Their united front was absolute, a silent pact against me. The silence, however, was deafening. It screamed of deception, of a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter the very foundation of our family. I felt like a detective in my own home, sifting through scraps of conversation, observing their subtle glances, trying to piece together the puzzle. My sleep became restless, filled with fragmented dreams of locked doors and whispered secrets. During the day, my mind raced, dissecting every past interaction, every seemingly innocent comment, searching for clues I might have missed. The more I looked, the more I saw, or thought I saw. Little things, like the way my mother would sometimes flinch when Sarah mentioned the house, or the way my father would quickly change the channel if a news report about property values came on. Each observation fueled my growing conviction that something was terribly wrong, something they were actively concealing. One evening, I overheard a snippet of conversation from their study, the door slightly ajar. My father's voice, low and urgent. "She's getting suspicious. We need to be more careful." My mother's reply was muffled, but I caught the word settlement. Settlement? The word echoed in my mind, a discordant note in the carefully constructed symphony of their lies. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and exhilaration. This was it, the first crack in their impenetrable facade. The next morning, I began my own investigation. I started with public records, searching for any property deeds under Sarah's name, or my parents' names, registered in the past few months. Nothing immediately obvious surfaced, which only deepened my suspicion. They were too careful. I shifted my focus to Sarah herself. Her new routine included regular, long drives, always alone. I decided to follow her. It felt clandestine, almost cinematic, tailing her beat-up sedan through the suburban streets. One Tuesday afternoon, she drove further than usual, past the familiar shopping centers and into an older, tree-lined neighborhood I didn't recognize. The houses there were stately, well-maintained, with manicured lawns and mature trees. She pulled into the driveway of a charming, two-story colonial, its brick facade partially hidden by climbing ivy. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a house. This was a substantial property, far beyond anything a 20-year-old college student could afford. I watched as she unlocked the front door with a key, the brass key, and disappeared inside. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This was her new house. But how? And why the secrecy? The anger which had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about the elaborate charade, the carefully constructed deception, and the blatant disregard for my feelings. I sat in my car, hidden from view, a storm brewing inside me. The resentment had deepened into a burning sense of betrayal. They hadn't just given Sarah a house, they had given her a secret life. One that excluded me, one built on a foundation of lies. The need to understand, to expose their deception, became an all-consuming obsession. I knew then, with absolute clarity, that I wouldn't rest until I uncovered every single detail of their secret. This was no longer just about fairness, it was about justice, my justice. The key, a simple piece of brass, became a searing brand on my consciousness. It wasn't just a key to a house, it was a key to a vault of secrets, a symbol of a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. My parents, the pillars of my world, had been meticulously building a second life, a hidden narrative where Sarah was the chosen one and I, the forgotten. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard resolve. I had to understand. I had to expose their deception. This wasn't about jealousy, it was about the fundamental unfairness, the blatant favoritism that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, finally boiling over. I started small, sifting through old conversations, replaying every seemingly innocuous comment, every subtle glance. The pieces, once scattered and meaningless, began to snap into place with chilling precision. My parents' sudden insistence on privacy, their hushed phone calls, the unexplained absences, all of it suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. The casual mentions of Sarah's future that I had dismissed as parental pride now echoed with a sinister undertone. They weren't just proud, they were planning. They were orchestrating. My first real break came unexpectedly during one of my mother's girls' nights out. I knew her routine, the meticulous way she organized her purse. It was almost too easy to slip into her study, the scent of lavender and old paper clinging to the air. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of guilt and adrenaline. I wasn't just looking for answers, I was invading a sacred space, crossing a line I never imagined I would. But the image of that brass key, glinting in Sarah's hand, fueled my determination. I found it tucked away in a locked drawer, a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with neat, meticulous entries. The ledger wasn't a diary, it was a financial record. A detailed account of payments, investments, and property taxes. The dates stretched back years, long before Sarah even graduated high school. My breath hitched in my throat as I traced the familiar address, the very one my father had rattled off with such casual ease on Christmas morning. It wasn't just a house, it was a carefully planned, meticulously funded project, a legacy built in secret, exclusively for Sarah. My parents had been siphoning off funds, making anonymous deposits, setting up shell companies, all to purchase and maintain this property, a future they had designed for one child, while leaving the other in the dark. The betrayal was a physical blow, a sharp, suffocating pain in my chest. It wasn't just about the house, it was about the years of calculated deception, the elaborate charade they had maintained. Every "we love you both equally," every "we're so proud of you," now rang hollow, a cruel mockery. I felt a cold fury rising, a burning need to confront them, to tear down the facade they had so painstakingly constructed. But I knew better than to act impulsively. This wasn't a tantrum, this was a war, and I needed to gather all my ammunition. I started documenting everything, taking photos of the ledger pages, cross-referencing dates with their financial statements, building an irrefutable case. The more I dug, the deeper the rabbit hole went. I discovered that the house wasn't just a recent acquisition. It had been purchased years ago, sitting vacant, waiting for Sarah to come of age. They had even hired a property manager to discreetly maintain it, ensuring no one, especially not me, would ever stumble upon their secret. The layers of deceit were staggering, a testament to their unwavering commitment to this clandestine plan. My parents, meanwhile, remained oblivious, basking in the glow of Sarah's excitement. They spoke of her new chapter with an almost performative cheer, their voices laced with an insincere warmth that now grated on my nerves. Sarah, innocent and unaware, chattered endlessly about decorating ideas, her dreams for the future, all built on a foundation of lies. I watched her, a knot of conflicting emotions tightening in my stomach. Part of me wanted to shake her, to expose the truth, to shatter her naive joy. But another part, a deeper, more painful part, knew that she was as much a victim of their manipulation as I was. The weight of their deception became a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. Sleep offered no escape, haunted by images of the ledger, the key, the smug satisfaction on my parents' faces. I became a ghost in my own home, moving through the days with a feigned normalcy, while beneath the surface a storm raged. The quiet conversations, the shared meals, the family movie nights, every interaction was tainted by the unspoken truth, the chasm growing wider between us. The resentment festered, turning into a bitter resolve. The time for understanding was over. The time for justice was drawing near. The day finally arrived, a crisp autumn morning that felt strangely calm given the storm brewing inside me. I had meticulously planned this, every step, every word, every calculated revelation. My parents had called a family meeting, a rare occurrence outside of holidays, citing an important announcement. Sarah, oblivious, bounced into the living room, a radiant smile on her face. She still carried that key on her keychain, a constant gleaming reminder of the injustice. I watched her, a knot of cold resolve tightening in my stomach. The stage was set. My father began, clearing his throat, his voice holding a familiar paternal warmth. He spoke of legacy, of family, of securing our future. My mother nodded along, her gaze occasionally flicking to me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Sarah, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with excitement. She probably thought they were announcing her engagement, or some grand new venture for her. She had no idea the house of cards she lived in was about to come crashing down. Then came the moment. "Sarah," my father said, his voice softer now, "your mother and I have decided it's time to formally transfer the deed to the house into your name. It's a gift, a promise of security, a foundation for your future." Sarah gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. She leaped up, embracing them both, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Mom, Dad, thank you. This is everything." I let the moment hang, the silence after her outburst thick with unspoken history. Then, I spoke, my voice cutting through the saccharine air like a shard of ice. "Funny," I said, my gaze fixed on Sarah. "I thought that was my future." All eyes snapped to me. Sarah's joyous expression faltered, replaced by confusion. My parents stiffened, their faces paling. "What are you talking about?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a sudden defensiveness. "The house," I stated, my voice steady, unwavering. "This house, the one you're so thrilled to be getting. It was always supposed to be mine, my inheritance, my future." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father started to speak, but I cut him off. "Don't bother denying it. I have the proof. Every conversation, every promise, every document." I pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with my mother's elegant handwriting. "Remember this, Mom? Your journal, the one where you meticulously documented every plan for my future, every dream for my life in this house?" Sarah looked from me to our parents, her face a canvas of dawning horror. "What is she talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For years," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "they told me this house, this life, was my destiny. Every sacrifice I made, every choice, was framed around the promise of this home. I gave up opportunities, relationships, my own life, for this phantom future." I looked directly at my parents, their faces now etched with shame and a flicker of fear. "You groomed me, manipulated me, for your own convenience. You built your golden cage around me, and I, like a fool, stayed." "That's not fair, Sarah," my mother finally managed, her voice trembling. "We always wanted what was best for you." "Best for me?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Or best for you? Who would take care of you in your old age? Who would be the dutiful daughter, always there, always reliable, while your precious Sarah went off and lived her life, free and unburdened?" Sarah's eyes were wide, darting between us. What are you saying? That this house, it was a trap for you? It was a leash, I corrected, my voice cold. A golden leash disguised as a gift. And you, Sarah, you were the new shiny toy they replaced me with. The one who didn't know the strings attached. My father finally found his voice, booming now, trying to regain control. Enough! This is not the time or place for this, Sarah. Oh, it's exactly the time and place, I retorted, my gaze unwavering. Because the truth needs to be heard. All of it. I pulled out another document, a faded legal paper. This is the original will, drawn up years ago before your little change of heart, Mom and Dad. It clearly states this house, along with a significant portion of their assets, was to be mine. Signed, sealed, witnessed. I held it up for Sarah to see, then dropped it onto the coffee table with a soft thud. You see, Sarah, this isn't just about a house. It's about a lifetime of lies, of manipulation, of being deemed expendable the moment someone else came along who was easier to control, easier to mold. Sarah picked up the will, her hands shaking. She read it, her eyes scanning the faded ink, her face growing paler with each passing word. Her gaze lifted, meeting mine, and in her eyes, I saw not just confusion, but a dawning realization, a flicker of betrayal. The same betrayal I had carried for months. You knew, she whispered, her voice cracking as she turned to our parents. You knew all of this. And you let me believe. You let me take her place. My mother burst into tears, covering her face. My father looked away, his shoulders slumping. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my mother's sobs. The air was thick with shattered illusions and raw, exposed truths. The house key, once a symbol of joy and security for Sarah, now lay between us, a cold brass monument to a broken family. The climax had arrived, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating implosion of a carefully constructed lie. The quiet devastation in the living room was a hollow echo of the Christmas mornings we used to share. My mother's sobs, ragged and raw, pierced the silence, each one a fresh wound on the already fractured tableau of our family. The brass key, once a gleaming promise, now lay between us, a cold, hard truth of betrayal. It had become a monument to the careful deception my parents had woven, a symbol of the life I had been denied. My own heart, which had pounded with a frantic rhythm of dread just moments before, now felt strangely numb, a frozen core in the center of a storm. I looked at Sarah, her face a mask of shock, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The truth had landed on her like a physical blow, shattering the carefree innocence she had always possessed. She had been their golden child, showered with affection and material comforts, while I had been the shadow, the afterthought. Now, in this agonizing moment of reckoning, the scales had tipped, not in my favor, but in a way that exposed the rot at the core of our family's foundation. The resentment that had simmered within me for years, a low, constant flame, now roared to life, consuming every other emotion. It wasn't just about the house key anymore, it was about every slight, every favoritism, every whispered comparison that had chipped away at my self-worth. My father finally broke the silence, his voice a strained whisper. We thought we were doing what was best, for everyone. His words, meant to be a balm, felt like acid. Best for whom? I wanted to scream. Best for the daughter you secretly groomed for success while leaving me to fend for myself? The betrayal was a bitter taste in my mouth, a metallic tang of broken trust that superseded even the anger. It wasn't just a house, it was the entire narrative of my life, rewritten by their hidden agenda. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate act of deception, a calculated manipulation of my future. I stood then, the movement deliberate, every muscle in my body vibrating with a controlled intensity. Best, I repeated, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. You stole my future. You lied to my face for years, and you call that best? My gaze swept from my father's guilt-ridden face to my mother's tear-streaked one, then finally settled on Sarah, who still seemed lost in a daze of disbelief. You orchestrated my failure to ensure Sarah's success. This house, this gift, is just the tip of the iceberg of your deceit. Sarah finally stirred, her eyes meeting mine, a flicker of understanding mixed with anguish. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The question was a low thrum of pain, but also an invitation. This was it. The moment of justice, the confrontation I had unknowingly craved for years. The truth, raw and unvarnished, was about to erupt. I'm talking about the scholarship application mysteriously lost in the mail, the accidental scheduling conflicts that kept me from extracurriculars, the subtle discouragement from pursuing. My passions, I stated, each word a hammer blow. I'm talking about every mistake that steered me away from opportunities, every oversight that ensured I wouldn't outshine Sarah. My parents flinched, their faces paling, but I pressed on, the dam of suppressed emotions finally bursting. You didn't just give Sarah a house, you built it on the ruins of my ambition. The air crackled with tension, the silence now heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. My mother let out a choked sob, her hands covering her face. My father simply stared, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and a dawning realization of the magnitude of their actions. Sarah, however, looked from them to me, a slow, horrifying understanding dawning in her eyes. The naive adoration she had always held for our parents was crumbling, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. You knew? Sarah's voice was a barely audible whisper, directed at our parents, but her gaze was fixed on me, seeking confirmation of the unthinkable. All this time! You manipulated everything? My father finally lowered his head, a silent admission of guilt. My mother's sobs intensified. The image of the perfect family, the one they had painstakingly constructed, was shattering into a million irreparable pieces. This was the reckoning, not just for me, but for all of us. The truth, once a hidden poison, was now out in the open, burning away the carefully constructed facades. A strange calm settled over me. The rage was still there, a simmering ember, but it was now tempered with a profound sense of bittersweet closure. I had exposed their lies, unveiled their favoritism, and shattered the illusion of our perfect family. The cost was immense. The family as I knew it was irrevocably broken. Yet in that wreckage, a new path emerged, one built on honesty, even if it was a brutal one. I had lost the family I thought I had, but I had gained the truth, and with it, the first real step towards reclaiming my own future, unburdened by their manipulative shadows. The key, lying forgotten on the floor, was no longer a symbol of Sarah's triumph, but of the painful, necessary freedom I had finally seized for myself. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant wail of a siren. My parents, pale and shaken, stared at me as if I were a stranger. My sister, still clutching the house key like a sacred relic, looked from them to me, her face a mask of confusion. The truth, meticulously uncovered and laid bare, hung heavy in the air, a toxic cloud that suffocated every pretense of our perfect family. You don't understand, Sarah, my mother finally whispered, her voice barely audible. We did it for you. To protect you. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that startled even me. Protect me? You stole my inheritance, my future, my very identity, and you call that protection? My voice cracked with the weight of years of silent suffering. You gave my sister a life that was meant for me, a life I worked for, a life I deserved. My father, usually so stoic, slumped in his chair. Your grandfather. He was a difficult man. He had conditions, Sarah. Conditions we knew you wouldn't accept. Conditions, I scoffed, the word tasting like ash. Like what? That I wouldn't marry someone you disapproved of? That I'd dedicate my life to a company I never wanted to run? The depth of their deception was a wound that would never fully heal. They hadn't protected me. They had manipulated me, all under the guise of love. My sister, Megan, finally spoke, her voice trembling. What are you talking about, Sarah? What inheritance? The look on her face, a mix of disbelief and dawning horror, was almost unbearable. This wasn't about hurting Megan, but she was an unwitting casualty of our parents' machinations. Grandpa left me the house, Megan, this house. He left me the majority of his estate, with a trust fund that would have set me up for life. But there were strings attached. Strings Mom and Dad decide. I shouldn't have to deal with. So, they just took it and gave it to you, piece by piece, year after year. Megan's eyes darted to our parents, then back to the key in her hand, as if it had suddenly become a poisonous snake. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The lavish vacations, the expensive college, the down payment on her first apartment, all of it built on a foundation of lies. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, directed at our parents. Their silence was her answer. The dam broke. Tears streamed down her face, not for herself, but for the sisters she thought she knew, for the family she believed in. I watched, a strange mix of vindication and sorrow washing over me. This wasn't the joyous triumph I had envisioned. The unraveling of their deception was painful, messy, and devastating for everyone involved. But it was necessary. The truth, however brutal, had to surface. My parents tried to salvage something. Anything. But their words were hollow, ringing with desperation. "We thought it was for the best," my mother pleaded, reaching out a hand to me, which I instinctively recoiled from. "We wanted you to be free, Sarah. Free from his control." "You didn't free me," I retorted, my voice sharp with a pain that had festered for decades. "You imprisoned me in a life of uncertainty, while you enjoyed the fruits of my grandfather's legacy. You made me believe I was a failure, that I wasn't good enough to earn what I deserved." The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with years of resentment finally unleashed. There was no easy resolution, no Hollywood ending where we all embraced and forgave. The damage was too deep, the betrayal too profound. Megan, through her tears, looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, the answer forming in my mind with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "I'm going to reclaim what's mine. Every single penny, every single asset. And I'm going to live a life free from your shadows, free from your lies." It was a bittersweet victory. The family I had yearned for, the one I had tried so desperately to hold on to, was shattered beyond repair. But in its place, a new kind of freedom emerged. The freedom of truth, the freedom of knowing my own worth, and the freedom to finally, truly be myself. The house key, once a symbol of my sister's privilege, now represented the key to my own liberation, a future built on honesty, not deceit. The journey had been long and arduous, but I had finally found my way home,